Good afternoon, dear students. I'm Ms. Mulungu, and welcome to the presentation of English 3. This presentation will cover subject content, although not all of it, in preparation for your exams in the year 2018. By now, you should have a good idea about what the subject is all about, having done an assignment already and facing examinations. Please, I'm advising you to use the study guide, whether it's for assignments or for exams, and additional materials as well. But please don't overlook the study guide. Let's move on to the content, starting off with the importance of teaching learners spelling strategies in lessons. The first point is teaching spelling helps children to internalize not only the spellings of words, but spelling patterns. If you are consistent in your lessons, teaching spelling here and there, maybe doing it like once every week, the learners will actually internalize the spelling of the words and the patterns as well. They say practice makes perfect. If a learner gets the habit of spelling words, they will realize when a certain word is misspelled, and they will want to learn new words, building on their vocabulary as time goes. The next point is young children especially benefit from reading favorite selections again and again. The point that I have to make clear here is you need to use interesting pieces or articles or novels or stories when you are teaching spelling with learners. Okay? When you deliver a lesson, make it a habit for learners to read. Once they read, you give them an activity for spelling. You can write words on the board, for example, which are misspelled, and then you ask the learners to write them in the correct form. Or you can have a spelling test. You read out the words and the learners write them on a piece of paper or in a spelling book. The next point is children benefit from guidance in developing a spelling conscience. This means the learners will develop a concern for spelling, and when something is misspelled, when a word is misspelled, they will be able to click that, no, miss or sir, this word has been misspelled. So if you continue teaching spelling in your lessons, then the learners will also have that desire to learn how to spell words. The strategies that you can use to teach spelling include writing the word 2 or different ways and decide which one looks right. With the learners, you can write words on the blackboard. One word, for example, but you write it in 3 different ways. Like the word advice, for example. Of course, advice has 2 forms, one which is a verb and the other one which is a noun, but you can inform the learners that you are writing advice of a verb, and then you misspell it 2 times, and the third time you write the same word, you spell it correctly. If these learners are used to spelling lessons, they will be able to tell that, no, the other 2 words are the wrong ones, and the third one is the one which is spelled correctly. The next point is locating the correct spelling in a familiar text or in print displayed in the classroom. Let's say you give learners an activity to spell words, for example, and you can always encourage them to consult books or articles or any other text so that they can find similar words in those texts, and that will help them identify or know which word has been misspelled or how is it spelled correctly then. The next strategy is asking someone. The learners need to be comfortable with you as a teacher or with their peers so that they can ask when they struggle to spell a word. It's always nice to ask and learn something new or something that you have forgotten, for example, and then everything will be right. The next strategy you can use is consulting a dictionary. A dictionary is a book with meanings, and words in a dictionary are always spelled correctly. So encourage the learners to use dictionaries when they want to spell words or when they want to find out meanings of words. And the last strategy there is using a spell checker. We don't really have computers in schools, but when a computer or a laptop is available, encourage learners to use spell check. It's that can be found in the Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, or you can encourage them to search for words on the internet. Let's move on to the next slide. Homophones and homographs. These are two most commonly confused words, but a homophone refers to words that sound the same when you pronounce them, but they have different meanings and are spelled differently. But if I just come in a class and say eyes, a learner may not know which eyes I'm referring to. So it can either be eyes of the organ or eyes, the cold substance. You can also add extra examples there, like the word bear, as in plain, and bear of an animal. What are homographs? Homographs are words that are spelled exactly the same, but their meanings differ. And you will only be able to tell the meanings in context. For example, the word bed. The word bed can refer to a river bed or a river bank. Or the word bed can also be used to something that you sleep on. Another example that I can give here is the word lean. When you lean against something, and when something is thin or doesn't have fat, like lean meat, but you can also lean against the wall. Moving on to the next slide on the importance of assessment for Namibian teaching and learning. The first point there is assessment motivates learners and teachers to extend their knowledge and skills and establish sound values. Remember that when you assess someone, you are testing them. So if you keep testing someone or you keep testing yourself, then you'll know that sooner or later your knowledge will also increase. Because as you test yourself, as you are tested, when you are given a quiz, when you are given an activity to do, you learn to study. You learn to research. And then if you continue doing that, you will eventually extend your knowledge as well as your skills. The next point is it promotes healthy study methods. If you are given a test today, you might ace it or you might not. And if you don't ace it, that means the strategy or the method that you use to study will have to be changed to be the most suitable one so that you can have better marks next time. So if you want your study methods to change, if you want your marks to increase, then that means you have to change the study methods. The next point is assessment tasks help learners to solve problems intelligently by using what they have learned. There are cases where you find that teachers don't test the learners at all. How will learners learn to solve problems if you as a teacher don't give them work. So as you test the learners, they will find ways to solve problems. Today they will try that, and if it doesn't work, then they will move on to the next way that they can use to solve problems. But if you don't test them, they will be, it's like keeping them in the dark, and they will obviously fail or are bound to fail. The next point is teachers use the information from assessment to improve teaching and learning materials. We have a tool called a self-assessment tool, which teachers can use to assess their teaching. There's also part of a lesson plan where there's reflection after testing or giving activities to learners. Why do we have these things? It's because we need either to change our teaching strategies or the learning strategies. And if you have to change your teaching and learning strategies, it means you have to look for resources and that will help improve your teaching or your learning. The next point is marks given for class activities, homework, or short tests on completion of a topic can be recorded for continuous assessment. Lower grades, grade 1 to 10, have what we call CAS marks, which refer to continuous assessment marks. These marks are normally used throughout the year. The marks for the first term are added together and used at the end of the term. And then for the 3 terms, those marks are added together, and then that's where you add the exam mark to give you the final mark. So if you give learners activities, if you test the learners, if you assess the learners, then you'll have marks that you can use at the end of the year to add to the exam mark and come up with a final mark for the learners. The last bullet there is used to inform learners and parents about progress and achievements, and to initiate compensatory teaching when needed. Most often than not, we keep parents in the dark. We don't tell them about their learners or kids' progress. But if we test learners, if we assess learners, then we have a ground to lean back on. Assessments show exactly where a learner stands. If a learner understands, then they are bound to do well in class activities or in tests or any other task that you give them. But if they are not, then it will be reflected in the assessment that you give as well. So this really helps. You can tell your learners that, no, you didn't do well, and it's because of this test. You will have proof. Next slide. Principles of motivation in the English classroom. The first principle there is positive reinforcement. If you want to motivate someone, do it in a good way. How do you do it? You encourage, you praise, you talk to a person in a good manner, you do things that you know the person will accept and make them have that will to change or to work hard. The next principle is clear goals and instructions. When you give an activity, for example, you have to set goals. What exactly is expected? When you set questions, what is expected of the learners? And you have to make sure that the instructions you give is clear. I remember there was a time that I wrote an exam and there were no instructions. Like, it was a multiple choice question, and there wasn't an instruction of whether I should circle the option or I should tick the option. Now, what I did was put a cross next to the correct answer. But what the teacher failed to do is give instructions. So if you as a teacher are planning to give an activity, you are planning to assign work to the learners, you must make sure that your goals and instructions are clear. The next principle is the element of surprise. Learners get bored from doing the same thing all over again. So instead of letting the learners know exactly what you do next, why not surprise them and do something different? When you surprise them, it keeps them on their feet. They don't know what will come up next, and that will make them always be ready. So surprise the learners. Come up with a different strategy. Come up with a different activity. If you are used to always teach in a lecture form, how about you use a video? How about you sync to the learners, but using the right content, of course. It will help. The next principle is variety is the spice of life. Don't always be this boring teacher that the learners are used to. How about you explore other strategies to make your lessons more exciting? If today if today you are giving a lecture, tomorrow why not use peer assessment or peer tutoring? Or if it doesn't work, how about group discussions? Change your strategy. The last principle there is friendly competition. Allow competition in the class. It can be competition within oneself. It can be competition between learners. It can be competition between your class and another teacher's class. If competition motivates learners, everyone wants to be on top. So why don't you allow competition among the learners, or at least encourage it if it's not there? Let's move on to the next slide, which is figures of speech. We have several figures of speech, but we'll start off with a simile. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things using words like SA and like. For example, you can give an example like, she is as fat as an elephant, or he is as tall as a giraffe. The next figure of speech is a metaphor, which is a comparison of two things, but this time you don't use the comparison words like SA or like. You just say that something is. For example, my teacher is a dragon. This doesn't mean the teacher is really a dragon, but they have something in common. Or another example can be, he is a snake. That doesn't really mean that the person is a snake. It only means that they have something in common, which is maybe being evil. The next figure of speech is alliteration. This refers to a repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words in the same line. For example, that example there is stellar students synthesize sweet sentences. Notice the S at the beginning of every word. That is what we call alliteration. Let's move on to personification. When you personify, you give characteristics or qualities of humans to inanimate things. For example, when you say, the birds sang in the trees, it's not really singing, but the sound they make, if you call it if you call it a song, or you say the birds are singing, which is a characteristic of humans, that means you are personifying. If you say, for example, the dogs are having a meeting, dogs don't really have meetings. Of course, they gather, but the gathering is not called a meeting. A meeting is normally something which is done by humans. So when you do that, you are personifying. The next figure of speech is onomatopoeia. This is the use of words that sound like their meaning, or mimic sounds. For example, the sound that the ducks make is called a quack. But when you feed ducks stale bread, they will go like quack, quack, quack. So the sound represents, the word represents the sound that the ducks make. When you throw a spoon on a floor, for example, it makes a sound like cling clang. That's the sound. And the words also that are used to represent the sound are also called cling clang. Let's move on to the next figure of speech, which is a hyperbole. A hyperbole is an exaggeration with some truth in it. It may sound funny, it may sound hilarious or ridiculous, but still, it has some truth in it. For example, you snore louder than a freight train. The fact here is the sound is really, the snore is really too loud that you can compare it to a freight train. But really, they cannot really measure up. It's like an exaggeration. Another example I would give here is the floor is so clean, I can see myself through it. But can you really see yourself through the floor? But the emphasis here is on the cleanliness. So if you say something is clean, that you can see yourself through it, you are using hyperbole. The next slide is on apostrophe use. An apostrophe is a punctuation mark, and it looks almost like a comma, only that it's used for the following reasons. When do you use apostrophes? You can use an apostrophe to show an omission of a letter in a contraction. For example, the word don't. There's a letter that is missing there. Don't is a contracted form, and the full form is do not. Can't, full form is cannot. Won't, full form is will not. You also use apostrophes with S for possessives of singular nouns. Look at the examples there. Maria's book. Whose book is it? Maria's. So if you have to put it in the possessive form, then you have to use an apostrophe between the last letter of the noun. After the last letter of the noun. Another example there is Thomas' pen and Veyo's class. You also use an apostrophe without S for possessives of most plural nouns. Most of the plural nouns already have an S at the end. So you cannot add an apostrophe and then another S, like the girls club, then you make it the girls as in GIRLS apostrophe and then another S. It will sound awkward. So if the noun already ends in S, all you do is add an apostrophe, but don't add another S again. You use an apostrophe with S when two or more nouns possess the same thing. For example, Maria and Hilma's book. Now, notice, look at that example, and you will realize that the apostrophe only comes at the last noun. So the book belongs both to Maria and Hilma, but the apostrophe only comes after the second name or after the second noun. Another example there is Sophia and Nugi's family, Gogo and Tuli's pens. The next slide is on prefixes and suffixes. We'll start off with a prefix. A prefix is an affix which you add at the beginning, or let me say before, the stem of a word. Look at that first example. The word dis can be added to a word to mean not. For example, disobey. The stem there is obey, and the prefix is dis. Now, when someone disobeys, they do not obey. More examples. Anti means against. Bio means life. Cent in century means 100. Let's move on to suffixes. A suffix is an affix that you add at the end of a stem of a word. For example, manage. If you add a suffix, it will be manageable, which makes the word which will make the word manage an adjective. Manage itself is a verb, but when you add able, it becomes an adjective. The next example is of a suffix is ly. Most of the time when we add the ly to a stem of a word, it becomes an adverb. For example, the word beautiful. The word beautiful is an adjective because it's describing a noun, but when you say she danced beautifully, adding the ly, then it becomes an adverb. The next example is tion, as in tion. When you add tion, the form of the word changes to a noun. For example, the word connect. The word connect is a verb, but when you say connection, it becomes a noun. And the last example there is al. When you add al at the end of a stem of a word, it becomes an adverb. An adjective. For example, the word adjective, if you add al, becomes adjectival, which makes it an adjective. Let's move on to the next slide, which is summary writing. How does one write a summary? The first thing that you need to do is read the passage thoroughly and give it a title if it doesn't have one. Read it and make sure you understood, because the main purpose of summarizing is to show that you have understood and are able to make a shorter version of the original text. The title you choose will indicate whether you have been able to understand the passage or not, because the title should go hand in hand with the content. If your title does not deal with the main idea of the passage, that means you have not understood. Now, after you have read the passage and given it a title, give it another reading, underlining the main ideas. Most of the time, you'll find that each paragraph in a passage has a main idea, which is normally in the topic sentence. So underline that main idea as you go through the second time. When you're done with that, come up with a draft using only the ideas that you have underlined. Then you omit illustrations, examples, details, and the repetitions. They are not needed in the summary again, because a summary is supposed to only have the main ideas of the text or the passage. The next point is arrange these points logically. Normally, the points are arranged in the way they appear in the original text. So if an idea was the first one in the text, it should still be the first in the passage. Even if you have to jump another idea, maybe you just didn't see it, the following idea should still be in the same order as they appear in the original text. The next point is write in your own words. When you copy the words, using them exactly as they are, you are not summarizing. When you are able to use your own words to rewrite the same piece of writing, that shows that you have understood. If the summary is too long, rewrite it. The reason it's called a summary is because it's supposed to be brief or short. The summary should be in the same tense, in third person, and in indirect speech. If you are given a passage, or you are giving a passage to learners, and it's in past tense, for example, and you want them to summarize it, they should also use the same tense to rewrite that same text in a summary form. Write in the third person and in indirect speech. Indirect speech is the opposite of quoted speech. That means you are not writing exactly what, let's say if there's a use of quotation marks in the original text, in the summary, those quotations will be omitted. Let's move on to the last slide, which is the conclusion. I'm urging you, as you are preparing for the exams, don't try to memorize everything. What is very important is to make sure that you have understood the content of the study guides. Memorization sometimes also just confuses you. If you forget a word, then you mess up on the whole thing. Read instructions carefully. If you read the instructions, then you will not make mistakes. If an instruction says, for example, skip this page, or skip this, the next question, and you don't read the instructions, you will answer that question, and you will not gain any marks because you are not following instructions. You are not supposed to answer that same question. You are supposed to skip it. So please read the instructions carefully to make sure that you write what is expected of you. And when you are answering, make sure that you have a complete answer. This will depend entirely on the number of marks allocated per question or part of question. It will also help you determine how much you are expected to write. For example, a question that says discuss and there's, for example, 20 marks, and you list and you only write about 7 points, you will not gain any marks. It will not be enough. It will be insufficient. Write as neatly as you can to help or make it easy for the teacher or the tutor to mark. Use your own examples as far as possible to show that you have understood and have not merely memorized the content of the study guide. At the end, I just want to wish you luck with the upcoming examinations. Thank you.